Nerd Rage paired up with Cervantes here for the cleave.
All right, I'm curious to see how it goes head-to-head. I mean, this is a similar matchup we saw with the Pumpers earlier against Change My Mind. They wanted this Death Knight Warrior into the Rogue Mage, and then when we saw that team change to a Wizard Cleave composition, Fnobbers, the new member for the Pumpers, formerly on the Chalky Milkmen, is playing that Balance Druid Death Knight to try and dampen the Wizards. So the Pumpers have a good answer for Rogue Mage in general play with this Warrior Death Knight. Then they can counter-comp the Wizard Cleaves by bringing in Fnobbers on Moonkin, and that's going to be their game plan, and I definitely think they won the blind pick. I'm curious to see how AWC can overcome this disadvantage.
Yeah, right away the Pumpers looking to get aggressive. Drainer immediately using the Way of the Crane and his Trinket to get out of blind, retreating back to the pillar once again, taking full advantage of Alec's Frozen Orb. And this is one thing we see really good Mistweavers do, is when a Frost Mage drops down some of that AoE, a Blizzard, or a Frozen Orb, the Mistweaver Monk, he's susceptible to Polymorph, so he just runs inside of it so he can get the heals out he needs, potentially look for that Way of the Crane. That way Alec doesn't really have an opportunity to land those Polymorphs, as it will break to that AoE damage.
Yeah, definitely will. Nixie, wondering if he's playing the Flying Daggers build. He's been using Fan of Knives periodically, trying to just spread poisons maybe onto multiple targets to build up his energy regeneration and also have some healing reduction onto multiple members. The Warrior is definitely the weak link here in the matchup against ABC. Warrior not bringing any sort of self-healing mechanics, so any damage they do to him will stick, and he will have to wait for Drainer to get out of crowd control to stabilize him, which is why we don't see ABC attacking the Death Knight. Attacking the Mistweaver Monk can be a viable option, but because of how much max health players have in the current patch, it's a little bit unlikely that you actually kill a healer in a swap, and as Rogue Mage, if you don't kill the target in a stun when it's a healer, you're probably not going to kill it. So it just makes more sense for ABC before dampening to just attack the Warrior, control the Death Knight, control the Mistweaver, try and burst down the Warrior as much as you can, maybe deeper into dampening, switch to the Death Knight when that Death Strike is less potent, as the Death Knight can't escape to safety, which is one advantage the Warrior brings, is mobility. He can use Heroic Leap to jump to safety, and typically Arms Warriors use that Heroic Leap defensively. They don't like jumping into the fight with it. They'll save it to then retreat back to the pillar when their healer is crowd controlled, and that's what I'm really looking to see here from Nerd Rage, is when Drainer is crowd controlled, how does he respond? How is he able to avoid the damage and stay alive himself?
I'm always interested to see what builds these mages are playing. Alec is actually running an interesting one, similar to what we saw yesterday. He's playing basically a tank mage, where he actually picked up the PvP honor talent, Nether Wind Armor, which reduces the chance he gets struck or gets critically struck by 15%. Makes you very durable. I really feel like it's an underrated talent, so I like to see him implementing that. But Nixie getting swapped to, getting bursted down, almost an execute range. Shadow steps away to Asgroth, should be able to survive. But yeah, Alec, with that tanky honor talent as well, playing Lonely Winter, and something we basically never see, Chain Reaction, which increases your Ice Lance damage against frozen target by 3%, stacking up to 5 times. So he's really just focusing on Ice Lance damage, instant cast damage, as he knows with the Warrior on him, with the Death Knight on him, is unlikely he's going to be getting off these Frostbolts. And I actually think it's a smart adaptation. I think a lot of the time these mages, they're relying too much on Frostbolt, and it's just so unlikely to get that off with the Death Knight on you, who's just marching on you and sitting on top of you the entire game.
With the Flying Daggers build that Nixie is running, and then the Ice Lance build that Alec is playing, it makes me think that Drainer is actually going to be their kill target and main objective. This way, when they switch to Drainer, stun him and hold him in place, an Arms Warrior and Death Knight have to be close to the targets they're attacking, so they'll be close to Drainer, and then when the 3 members are stacked up, Flying Daggers will hit 3 players, Frozen Orb will hit 3 players, and then in dampening, they can maybe try and overwhelm Drainer. That seems to be the only thing that makes a lot of sense to me. Of course, the Ice Lance build just is an easier time as a mage when you've got multiple melee constantly harassing you, so maybe that's just standard for the mage now in these melee cleave matchups when you know you're going to be the target. But Nixie running that Flying Daggers is a bit interesting, as he's not actually running any Azerite traits for it either, just the honor talent, so just a little bit of an added bonus. And they are constantly switching to Drainer and trying to burst him down in a stun. Later on in the match, I mean, that was already a close call with only Vendetta committed from Nixie. I almost wonder if Alec had pulled the trigger on Icy Veins, if they had been able to just kill Drainer right there. This strategy could work for ABC.
Yeah, definitely potential there, as long as Alec can hold on to some of those fingers of Frost procs, and he has all his instant cast damage ready with the Frozen Orb, as well as the Blizzard, as he is playing the Freezing Rain Honor talent. So anytime he gets the Frozen Orb down, he can get a free Blizzard. Just a lot of instant cast damage. So far, Asgrath's been doing a pretty good job on mana. What I want to continue to see the Pumpers do is make these swaps onto Nixie. He's already trinketed, he has evasion, but still vulnerable as a target. If he gets caught into a Stormbolt, definitely take him down. Alec now getting a little bit low, as they did use a Maledict on him. Is Asgrath going to be able to keep him up? That really is the question. Temporal Shield should be able to deflect for a little bit longer, but outside of these swaps onto Drainer, the consistent pressure from ABC really hasn't been there. But I do like what they're doing. Drainer trinketed out of a blind a little bit earlier on. Nixie committing Vanish, trying to get him low. Actually, I think he used a re-stealth with his Night Elf Racial, so he's able to get the Garrote Silence on Drainer to continue the chain. And as a response Drainer, he's going to be using not only his Way of the Crane, but also his Life Cocoon. So committing a few defensive cooldowns there in order to survive that swap coming in from ABC. So I like the strategy from ABC. We just need to see them consistently looking for these swaps onto Drainer.
This is the first time we've seen the Pumpers in a tournament, and they've been doing a great job so far, but still their Gladiators Maledict's coordination is very lackluster. In an earlier attempt, if they had just pulled the trigger, coordinated all three together, I almost guarantee Alec would have had to Ice Block. They initiated with one, it was dispelled. Then they waited the better part of 4 to 5 seconds to activate the second one. That one had to be healed through, and then they just didn't use the third one. Gladiators Maledict, especially with the way the current meta is best used one after the other in sync to deny as much healing as you can to force a powerful cooldown like an Ice Block. Now they're trying to go after Nixie behind the pillar with that Ring of Frost, but again, only one Gladiator's Maledict was used there. Asgrath just dispels it and then immediately heals the target back up. The only advantage I can see by splitting the Maledicts up is that you maybe run the other healer out of mana because they have to use Dispel more frequently, and Dispel is not exactly a low-cost spell for a healer. That's really the only thing, but I feel like against these mages when you're playing it with a Way of the Crane Monk is that you just use 3 Maledicts to get an Ice Block, 3 Maledicts to get an Ice Block, and then 3 Maledicts to get a kill. And if you can do that, it sounds really simple for me to explain. If you can do that, you're going to win the game very easily. So I really want to see the Pumpers just wait, let all 3 of their Gladiators Maledicts come back off cooldown because they're out of sync right now, and go for big wave pushes.
I think it's smart, especially if you can get Iron Bark out of the way, Temporal Shield out of the way, then it's almost a guarantee. The one thing Alec has available is he is playing the Dark Iron Dwarf, so he has that Fire Blood Racial if he really needs to, and we've seen people opt into that to remove the Gladiator's Maledict, as it is a magic debuff that can free him up from some of that healing reduction available. It's a good Racial, especially in this particular meta. Nerd Rage forced into the Die by the Sword as well. That was the Life Cocoon, so some good pressure. Nixie getting swapped to, though. Gladiator Safeguard procs. He's in execute range. Can they take him down? He gets chopped up by Nerd Rage and Cervantes, and that Rogue's just such a vulnerable target in this matchup. If they can make those swaps, the Pumpers really bringing it to him in game 1.
So here's the thing as well. When you do look at this composition, Sid was obviously critical of different things like trinket usage and things like that. When you have a comp that strong, you can afford certain mistakes. That's one of the reasons that we say these compositions are so strong right now. And when they do play it at such a good level mechanically, even if the trinkets maybe aren't completely synced, they're still going to be able to find pressure, and the Rogue is going to be that target this time around. Zika, what did you think of the trinket usage?
Well, I think it depends really. In certain situations, you have CC on the healer, then you can just shove them. In certain situations, if the spell is on cooldown, you can kind of use that Maledict. It is situational, but overall, we do like to see them stacked up. It really just depends. And I think this moment right here is just, honestly, Nixie, he trinketed out of a fear, I believe, and he just gets immediately punished on that. Asgrath was actually sneaking away for a drink, and that's what we like to see from the Pumpers. When a Resto Druid team is going for those drinks, immediately the team pops all of their cooldown on a member, forcing him to come back and lose out on the mana value that he would get from the drink, or just open up a potential kill here. This was, of course, a mistake on Nixie's end as well. I'm not really sure. What did he trinket there? Was it an intimidating shot? I'm not sure. He had his trinket at the start of that clip, and I don't know, maybe he misclicked. I'm not sure. I didn't.
You might have trinketed the Stormbolt into a leg sweep, maybe.
The leg sweep was full, though.
I don't know.
I didn't catch it.
Me neither.
Might be an error on my end. Either way, Nixie's trinket usage there probably wasn't ideal, and Asgrath, of course, was behind the pillar. He had to run all the way around. Drainer activating that Way of the Crane as well to punish that mistake, as he had the mana lead when Asgrath was out of mana to really force him to stop drinking. I like that.
Now we're going to be headed to Dalaran Sewers. This is a nice small map if you are the pumpers, but this is a map that ABC did pick. So what do you think ABC is trying to do here with this map selection, Zico?
Ooh, it's a tough one to call. I mean, they could run the same thing and potentially just try to kill Drainer more.
I don't like this.
I don't like this map either, but I think that's their strategy here. It's either that or potentially the Rogue Ellie.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this kind of idea of just, okay, if I pick this map, I know exactly what my opponent is going to be doing, and we get rid of one of those maps when we are on our pick. It's something that we've seen a lot of the teams do. I feel like we have been critical of it a whole bunch here, but the nice thing, I think one of the things that's undeniably nice about this for ABC is they're assuming they know exactly what the pumpers are going to do on this map, which means that they can have that plan, and it's going to go to script most likely.
That's true, but the pumpers, they got to be feeling comfortable locking in that composition. I don't know what ABC exactly
that's the
has.
downside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you lock in Dalaran Sewers. That's normally a really good map for a Death Knight. You're always in range to get Death Grip. It's really difficult to run away. They can keep you in combat easily with Death and Decay. Yeah, I don't know. The pumpers are really taking their time here, which is a little surprising to me, but ultimately will lock in the same composition, and this is what makes the pumpers so dangerous.
They're one of those teams that we do expect to take their full time locking it in. That's something that we see quite a bit. But ultimately, they have a plan. And, you know, when you try to weigh out the pros and the cons, it seems like the cons of ABC's strategy really do outweigh the pros because the pumpers do get to do exactly their plan. Yes, you know that they're going to do it, but it's because it's a line of play that they do want to go for. And now we're going to see an Ellie Mage. Sid, what do you think?
That's their best comp into the pumpers, period, I think. We already seen what happened to Omnivore against Elite Frost Mage. You don't move. So you just take Nerd Rage out of the equation. He's no longer even a possible player. Then you have to be able to beat the Boomkin Death Knight Mistweaver. That's what they should be more afraid of, and that's why I think the pumpers didn't lock in right away. They were measuring what's more likely to win, our Warrior into the Ellie Mage or our Boomkin into Rogue Mage. But because the pumpers got the blind pick win, they can now dictate the pace of the match. ABC have given them a good setting for the Warrior to potentially win, even though they're compositionally disadvantaged. I don't like what ABC have done by going for Dalaran. Would have made way more sense to go to, if you really wanted to, a neutral map like Tiger's Peak, but it would have been the most sense to go to Tolvaron or Ashamanes. I think the pumpers have the rest of the series off the back of that blind pick.
Okay, so you bring up Omnivore, right? Omnivore gets completely locked down. Like, Omnivore, if he had a pedometer on, I don't even think it would have registered the steps that he took on that hook point matchup in particular. Blackrook Hold is another one where he really just did not get to do anything. Nerd Rage is one of the best main warriors that I think we really do have in the world. I mean, obviously you talk about Blizzo as well, but Nerd Rage is one of these guys that this is what he plays. This is all that he plays. Is he going to be able to navigate through a situation like this any better, or is that just the nature of being a warrior?
Well, what I think when we saw the matchup earlier with Omnivore, he was playing with a mage. So it's a little bit different in that sense because you can easily sort of keep one warrior snared up. It's difficult for him to get to you. Use all your crowd control on him. Every time he charges, he gets knocked away, constantly getting rooted and Nova'd. But when you have a Death Knight on your team, it's a little bit different. All of a sudden, they have to worry about 2 melee targets. Cervantes can help him out with the Death Grip as well as some of the range stuns. So I think it's not as easy for Alec, and I think Nerd Rage will have more uptime in this matchup. In addition to that, I think Drainer, if he really wants to, he can go for the honor, or he can go for the talent Tiger's Lust, so he can help him out by getting him out of some roots and giving him that additional snare, or sorry, that root break in addition to speed with Tiger's Lust if he really needs to. And we've seen Drainer before use Ring of Peace really well, so we can use Ring of Peace as another tool to allow a Nerd Rage to get uptime. So I think the pumpers have a lot more tools available to them to enable Nerd Rage to actually get off some damage.
Yeah, it just seems like this composition, Zico, altogether is strong. You have ROP, you have grip, you have all these things to make sure that that uptime will be a lot better than some of the other compositions that we have seen. Let's take it a step further, though. Also, Drainer's going to be able to put out a decent amount of pressure as well, most likely. Do you expect that we see a talent choice from him come into play?
Yeah, I think we'll maybe see a late game. Actually, no Way of the Crane on Drainer.
Interesting.
But
never mind.
I think the interesting thing is Askarath has to go for drinks, and Dalaran Sewers is not a great map for drinks. In addition to that, Nerd Rage is going to be doing most of his damage with deep wounds as well. So I don't think this is going to be too bad for him. As long as he just tries to keep hitting people with Mortal Strike, he will get out at least 50 or 60% of his total damage just from that.
The Pumpers are gifted a map that allows them to play the strategy that we know them for, the strategy that gave them their name, the Pumpers. They're going to try to use Dalaran Sewers against ABC, who locked it in, and get themselves on match point.
Yeah, I think it was smart. It's definitely the high percentage play on the Pumpers' part. If they had locked in that balanced Druid Fnobbers, they would have gotten Rogue Maged, and we saw how that went for them earlier on in the tournament. So I think that taking at least the map advantage, even though you don't want to be a warrior against this composition, it's definitely a more smart play. However, their Maledict usage needs to be more precise if they're going to take down this composition. They need to do all-out coordinated attacks towards the Mage or Jamie, using those Maledict trinkets one by one with a little bit of crowd control onto the healer Asgaroth, and if they can execute on that 3 times in a row, I definitely think they can take this.
Yeah, I think so too. Drainer still doing quite well in terms of mana, and he actually is playing Tiger's Lust, so he will be able to free up Nerd Rage a little bit with that ability. Anytime he uses it, Nerd Rage will be able to break out of a root and also get a little bit of a sprint. And if he can maintain high uptime on Alec, I think it's going to be dangerous for Alec. And as well, the build that Alec's playing, where he doesn't have his pet, and he doesn't have Ice Nova because he's playing Lonely Winter, he loses out on a lot of those roots available to him. So Nerd Rage isn't going to be snared up and stuck in one spot nearly as often with the build Alex is playing. The trade-off is that Alec, of course, is going to be able to put out a little bit more instant damage in this matchup. But with the split strategy, I think Alec, it could theoretically actually get casted damage off. I don't know if I like the build nearly as much when you have an Elemental Shaman on your team. I feel like you want to be able to be that free casting threat in a Wizard setup like this.
What's interesting here by the Pumpers is that they're sending Cervantes to attack Jamie, they're sending Nerd Rage to attack Alec. So you would typically see a melee cleave have both members attacking the same player, but when facing a Wizard cleave, so 2 ranged classes, if you split up your melee, you've got disruption on both places, and neither Wizard can completely free cast and generate counter pressure, and it can be a way to attrition the Wizard cleave down in a long extended match. And this is where experience comes into play for the Pumpers. They've been playing melee cleaves for so long that they can bounce between some of the more typical strategies and atypical strategies like this, the split DPS strat, where your main goal isn't necessarily to kill the target, it's just to make them have the least amount of fun.
Yep, and if you're a player at home and you play Mistweaver Monk, normally mages are very difficult for Mistweaver Monks, but there are small tricks you can do. I kind of talked about it in the last game. You'll see Drainer, if he gets interrupted or he needs to heal up his team, he'll run into Alex Blizzard and his Frozen Orb. That makes him basically immune to Polymorph. He can get Polymorph, but it'll break immediately, and it's essentially a waste from Alec. And Drainer will be able to get some cast off, especially with the Thunder Focus T, if he has that. So definitely a good strategy adaptation, and if you're a new player at home, it's something you definitely want to look out for. Once your Polymorph breaks or once you top off your team, you can easily just Transcendence away to safety once again.
Another advantage of this split DPS strategy is that a Frost Mage brings in a lot of area of effect snares, but if you only send one person after him, he's only snaring one target. And same for Jamie, he has Thunderstorm, so this is an area-wide knockback effect. But if only one member is next to the target that he wants to knock back, the other one is still having uptime. So by splitting their resources into 2 different places, they can maximize their uptime, their damage output, and their disruption. It's definitely a good decision on their part, utilizing the map and this strategy to try and pressure the team. And if you're ABC, you don't want to stack up, because then you'll both get cleaved down by the Death Knight and the Warrior, and it becomes a bit of a game of chicken, because then when the Warrior and Death Knight are stacked up, they get cleaved by the Frozen Orb. But I think the Warrior and Death Knight do more damage in close quarters, so Alec needs to do a better job of staying away from Jamie and not stacking up as they just did a moment ago, because it did tax quite a bit of Asgaroth's mana. Drainer then, as the healer for the team, has to decide when to make pushes like this, activating the Way of the Crane, boosting his damage and allowing that damage to heal, but more importantly boosting his damage so they can push for a kill. And I would like to see this be the time where they use their Gladiator's Maledicts when they have increased damage from Way of the Crane, as it's more likely to create panic for the team of ABC, and panic will then lead to mistakes. Mistakes will then lead to openings later on in the match. But so far, the Pumpers' coordination has definitely been a weak point for their team overall, and that push right there was definitely lackluster.
Yeah, it could have been executed a little bit better, and we just want to see that done by them in order for them to actually secure a kill a little bit earlier on. But the Pumpers have managed to hold on. They've been limiting a lot of the damage that ABC has been able to do, but ABC has been in no real danger in this matchup. I can't help but feel that they're looking to play for a long game, but also at the same time allowing Asgarath to just go and drink whenever he wants. He's just been going for these restalls, resetting his mana by sitting down and drinking, and the Pumpers have made basically no effort whatsoever in trying to shut that down.
Nice play by Cervantes, death gripping Jamie behind the box, out of line of sight as Asgarath was making a crowd control push, trying to catch Jamie off guard. Nerd Rage then collided with Cervantes on that play, and that's really what we need to see from the Pumpers is when they decide to mix up their strategy. They obviously want to focus on splits, disruption, but if they can collide on the same target with good opportunities, that's when they can execute for kills. That's usually when we want to see Drainer also participate in the fight, adding some extra damage with the Way of the Crane. A death grip like that later in the match, deeper into dampening, could definitely net a kill for the Pumpers, but still, I want to see that Gladiator's Maledict coordination. I really haven't seen any usage of it in this match in particular, definitely not noticeable, and that trinket is supposed to be their win condition. So with Way of the Crane, Drainer runs into Frozen Orb. He's immune to its snare, and Frozen Orb will also break Polymorph. Now he paralysis his Asgarath, knocks him down out of line of sight. This is where they should be going for the Maledict play. They should be going for 1, 2, 3. 1, dispel, 2, heal through it, 3, and then find a kill, and they only went for 1 Maledict and then nothing after it.
Yeah, definitely not ideal. Stun now onto Asgarath. He uses the Iron Bark on Jamie. Jamie's just such a slippery target. The Elemental Shaman has a lot of mobility in Ghost Wolf. It basically suppresses all of your snares. Nerd Rage getting bursted down lower, has to activate the Die by the Sword, leaps behind the pillar. Drainer with no life cocoon has to channel out some heals in order to keep him alive. Actually, he uses the Revival. I feel like he could have held on to that a little bit longer. Potentially, maybe he wanted to dispel Cervantes out of something, but that's a big cooldown to heal up Nerd Rage when he had an opportunity to essentially free cast.
All right, Nerd Rage trading powerful defensive cooldowns. He's going to be a weak point for the team compositionally. They've been trying to overcome that disadvantage with target selection and strategy, but overall their execution is just not there. We do see both members collide on Alec. Nice Ring of Peace from Drainer. That definitely could be a win condition on the Dalaran Sewers, knocking Alec out of position, but he's able to restabilize by blinking back to Asgarath's side and connect a couple of heals. We have seen frequent usage of Lightning Lasso onto Cervantes, and I think the main reason for that is that Cervantes has multiple ranged forms of stops, so he's more likely to be able to interrupt Lightning Lasso, whereas Nerd Rage, you would like the Lightning Lasso damage on the Warrior because he's not going to Death Strike it back, but if you get interrupted instantly, you just get no damage, so maybe Jamie's just trying to calculate maximum damage output. He's never going to get a kill with that way of thinking, but maybe in dampening he can. I still would much rather see him Hex Cervantes. That way you can remove the Mind Freeze and then go for a Lightning Lasso on the Warrior. That's a bit more of a typical strategy on Elemental Shaman, and the thing is Hex is threatening that chain, so if the Death Knight uses the interrupt on Hex, then you just wait for the interrupt to fade and then you get it guaranteed. I think that would be a much better choice. I mean, imagine if there was a Lightning Lasso on Nerd Rage right now, instead going after Drainer with it, and he gets stopped on it. Jamie is definitely playing a bit lazy, I think, on Elemental Shaman in this match.
Alec with his Temporal Shield looking to deflect this attack, should be able to do it. And this is an opportunity for the Pumpers. They got Iron Bark and Temporal Shield. This is when we want to see the push with the Gladiator's Maledicts in order to take Alec down. They don't have anything to reduce the incoming damage or prevent the incoming damage, and I think they would be able to overwhelm Alec in the situation if they had those trinkets available. Alec still getting low. Drainer caught into the Polymorph as all 3 members looking to take down Alec. Asgarath having to use a lot of mana. This could be the first Ice Block. Alec still trying to kite away the best he can. Jamie looking to help with some peels. Drainer keeps Nerd Rage in the fight with the Life Cocoon as they push in and try to force out this first Ice Block. And Alec, running out of mobility, really didn't have much he could do. And that is the checklist the Pumpers need to be finding. Iron Bark, Temporal Shield. Once those are gone, that's when you push. That's when a mage is vulnerable, and you can actually start forcing out these Ice Blocks.
But now it will be counter-aggression from ABC as Stormkeeper is channeled. Lightning bolts are flying in. Drainer timing some big heals. Thunderstorm on the anti-magic zone, but unfortunately Nerd Rage able to immediately charge right back into its defense and on target. We see Frozen Orb currently down here for Alec. He wants to generate pressure. Nerd Rage uses Spell Reflect. This denies Ice Lance, which is boosted damage during Frozen Orb, so good defense on Nerd Rage. Ducking around the corner, waiting for that to then fade, then charging back into the battle. Definitely top-level Warrior play in terms of knowing when to bounce between both defense and offense. Alec looking to get crowd control, gets denied by Nerd Rage again with that War Banner. Nerd Rage definitely doing a great job. Cervantes, though, is starting to lose the 1v1 against Jamie. Now instead trying to collide on Alec along with Drainer. This is the Way of the Crane push. This is where they need to to coordinate their Maledicts.
They're gonna get
Maybe
it.
they don't even need to. The damage is too high. Second ice block has been forced, and the Pumpers are in the driver's seat.
The Pumpers, they know their win condition. Once again, we see Drainer with the way of the crane. When Ironbark's down, when Temporal Shield's down, ABC, they have to try to hold on to those defenses as long as they can, because if they're just throwing them out all willy-nilly, then it's just so easy for the Pumpers to make that offensive push. Jamie getting a little bit low, and as we move to 30% dampening, it really feels like most of the pressure's in the Pumpers' favor. Drainer had to trinket and use Life Cocoon and die by the sword, so now all of a sudden things are looking good for ABC. So many defensive cooldowns forced out basically instantaneously on the Pumpers.
All right, that lightning lasso might net a kill here. Maledict flies in, dispelled. Where's the second? A bit of miscommunication there with the Maledicts on ABC's part as well. Definitely not the highest level of usage of it. That's a big deal. That trinket is definitely a kill window for any team in the tournament. Hex secured onto Drainer. Frozen Orb dropped. Let's see how Nerd Rage decides to deal with this. Is he going to be able to? I think Servanas might have actually Dark Simulacrum to Frozen Orb.
I think so.
He's just putting it down. But now Nerd Rage is in trouble. He's got nowhere to run. Kited Nerd Rage into the perfect position. That was really well done from ABC, dragging him out into the open corner, away from the boxes. He responded too late. They were miscoordinated there. They got ahead of themselves, thinking that they could get a kill. Went for a push and got counter-aggressed. Thanks to ABC's good positioning, they were able to execute Nerd Rage.
And also, taking a step further, look at what map this was on. This could be very important for the rest of the series.
Yeah, they managed to take away Dalaran from the Pumpers, which is of course going to be very nice for them for the rest of the series. If they can make, the next pick on the Blackrook hold, then they only will really have a hook point to go to when it's the Pumpers map pick, and then maybe they can win this matchup as the Rogue Mage, having a smaller map to work with. Now, at the end of this one, we can see here Alec actually dragging them out in the corner, the Frozen Orb build being very effective, and Drainer had to trinket that Hex from Jamie earlier on. Nice Cyclone and Vortex there from Asgarath, and that Ray of Frost. As easy as 1, 2, 3, they take him down.
Might not be as easy as 1, 2, 3. We might need to see them take it might be like a 2, 4, 5 type situation here. I'm kind of curious how ABC actually does take this when Pumpers are going to have so many, they have the momentum right now, right? Like they can switch up so many different things. We're going to find out very shortly who's going to take this series. It's all tied up for now. The first series was a quick one. This one may take a little bit longer, and keep in mind, neither of these teams have dropped a series yet in the tournament. They're trying to get their spot in the grand final. And also, we already know the Pumpers, the reason that Method Black is in the lower portion of the bracket, it's because of this team. Zico, when we look right now, Dalaran Sewers, not necessarily we expected a map to not go the way of the Pumpers. What do we think that says about ABC for the rest of this series?
Well, it's intelligent that they managed to actually pick it away from the ABC managed to pick it away from the Pumpers. Sorry. It's good for them for the remainder of the series, but like we kind of mentioned before, there's still a lot of close quarter maps. Blade's Edge going to be one of them, of course. Very nice for a Monk. You can abuse that ZY axis by jumping down and transcending back up to avoid crowd control. You can knock people down as well with that Ring of Peace, kind of adding extra opportunity where there wouldn't be one normally. So it's a good map pick for the Pumpers. They're still gonna have Black Rook Hold and Hook Point to work with as well. The important thing here is if ABC wins this match, that's the swing match, and that's gonna kind of give them a big edge in the remainder of the series, because all of a sudden the Pumpers, they have two answers for the Wizard Cleaves. They can play the Moonkin and the Death Knight. We saw them do that previously and they had good success with that. The problem is they lost to Rogue Mage, and against Rogue Mage they can pick that Mistweaver Death Knight Warrior, probably what we're going to be seeing here from the Pumpers. And as long as ABC takes one of those swing matches, then they don't have to think about the Moonkin Death Knight as much.
Yeah, so this could be the map right here that could give ABC the edge. The Pumpers here, though, they should be able to throw in something spicy. We are going to see them with Nerd Rage and Cervantes in on the same composition that we have seen. How do you feel about this?
I think this is the exact matchup that they wanted. They won the blind pick on the Grand Arena, in my opinion. So far, we've seen this TSG setup, the Warrior, the Death Knight, and the Mistweaver Monk do quite well into Rogue Mage Druid. You have the Frost Mage who's getting tunneled down by the Death Knight and the Warrior, really limiting his damage, and then you have that very vulnerable target in Nixie. What I want to see from Nixie in this matchup is to make sure he's very conservative with all his defensive cooldowns. I feel like, although Alex the main target for them, Nixie is the one that's most likely to die in this matchup, so making sure you're spacing out your defensive cooldowns, holding onto your trinket for dear life, and I think if ABC can do that, they definitely have a chance in the match.
Yeah, like we just heard Ven say, Nixie did seem like that target in that first game. He just got chewed right through.
Oh, he's a swap target if he gets over aggressive. So if his Glidier's Medallion is gone as a rogue, you're highly susceptible to dying in a stun. Pumper saw that Nixie the rogue used his Glidier's Medallion on it. We haven't been able to identify what, but if he uses it for whatever reason and they have a stun, all three members will then collapse on that rogue and try and take him down. And again, that's the experience that the Pumpers bring on this melee cleave setup. They're not necessarily just tunneling the mage. If they see an opening on another target, that would be a good situation to take an advantage of, they take it. So the Pumpers look strong overall. Because they've won the blind pick, they can now have that pick advantage. ABC have to win here on Blades Edge Arena if they want to reverse that around so that they can avoid Fnobbers, Balanced Druids, because they're going to have to rely on that Ellie Mage later on, I think.
We haven't seen that come into play yet, but we know that that is something that is just waiting there. It is that extra X factor with that Balanced Druid. Whether or not we will see it, we will find out as we move through this series. We're all tied up. Blades Edge. Game number 3, which we do like to call here the swing matchup because it can determine which way the momentum does go. Does it switch back into the team that didn't win the blind pick, or does it stay with the team that took that first game? ABC versus the Pumpers, Game 3, gates open.
Yeah, we'll have to see what exactly ABC can get done in this matchup. It seemed like their best opportunity in game number 1 in the Grand Arena was going after Drainer, but immediately Alec actually finding a polymorph on Drainer, sneaking it in. Nerd Rage just going to be line of sighting with his Blade Storm. Now a big swap over onto Drainer. Immediate counter stun by Cervantes, though. I think we'll keep Drainer alive, buy him enough time to throw out that Life Cocoon. Now we've been seeing Mistweaver Monks, they just are not afraid of using that Life Cocoon as soon as possible. It's very efficient healing in terms of mana. It's also a really short cooldown, so it's not that scary to throw it out. Drainer's going to have that back up in around 40 seconds.
All right, Asgroth in the back line. Tommy a ton of heals with his Innervate. Really effective use of Innervate there, making all of his expensive healing free. That allows him to stay at top mana throughout this initial attack against the Pumpers. Now, ABC's main strategy against this composition has been to kill the Mistweaver Monk, so Drainer Drainer. On Blade's Edge Arena, this is why Drainer's team picked it. It's probably one of the more difficult maps to kill a Mistweaver because they can jump down off the bridge and then use Transcendence Portal back up. So Drainer moves in with Way of the Crane. They stun lock him and try and kill him. They held on to Asphyxiate to stun Nixie while Drainer was stunned, limiting the amount of damage, allowing Drainer more time to spend in the midfield. We see Maledict activated here onto Alex. Second Maledict, much better coordination in that position here by the Pumpers, but the temporal shield of Alec was perfectly timed and likely to soak up tons of that hits, but even still, a lot more momentum now that the Pumpers are coordinating better.
Yeah, I think it was smart. I think they got the Fire Blood racial from Alec there as well, so we won't have that available for the next time they have the Maledicts up, I believe. We'll have to see what can happen.
Ooh.
Drainer, I think, was going for a drink and actually got sapped. Nicely done by Nixie, but he commits his Vanish to do so. So one of his defensives now gone, and really they weren't able to get much done. I mean, it looks fancy to go Vanish off, get a sap, but when you have no damage to follow it up, it's essentially a wasted cooldown. Drainer's just going to be able to portal back up quite easily. Cervantes, Nerd Rage, they literally took 0 damage during that crowd control chain, and now Alec is the one that is in a little bit of trouble.
All right, so Way of the Crane is available. Waiting to see when Drainer tries to push in for that. I can imagine that Nixie is holding Kidney Shot to switch targets. So if Drainer just sits back and chills, doesn't really do anything, Nixie will sit on his Kidney Shot for an extended period of time, which means that Cervantes and Nerd Rage get more uptime. I actually think Drainer should just relax, take a break at the top of the bridge. You know, now they've committed the Kidney Shot. Icebound Fortitude traded for that. I guess Drainer was looking for a drink and resetting his mana pool. You do want to make trades when necessary for that, but Icebound Fortitude is typically needed to answer Smoke Bomb. I guess Nix actually isn't running that Smoke Bomb, instead maybe running Flying Daggers to maximize his damage, so that play from Cervantes is not going to be able to be punished due to the build that Nixie is running. Asgrath currently crowd controlled, but with preemptive activation of Iron Bark, Alec can tank all of this damage quite easily. Drainer using that Way of the Crane, but getting Kidney Shot on it. I don't believe they're going to have enough damage to take him down. It's just really unlikely, especially when you're by yourself as the Assassination Rogue in the current meta. You're not going to find a kill on a healer by yourself that easily. So instead, going for Cyclones and crowd controlling the Way of the Crane is just a better answer to remove damage and healing from the fight. They switch their attention to Nerd Rage, and they manage to at least pull Life Cocoon from that attack. So really nice mid-match adaptation on ABC's part. I really like their target bouncing, but they are starting to fall behind. Cervantes has stolen a Polymorph, now securing that onto Asgarath, trying to develop some pressure on Alec, but not finding any damage off of it. Drainer manages to make an escape. I still really like the map pick from the Pumpers. This was definitely a smart decision on their part, realizing that ABC was going after Drainer in Game 1. They remembered that moving into Game 3 and picked the best map for Drainer to be able to survive.
Yeah, and Drainer has been using the map quite effectively so far as he moves in, getting a double leg sweep onto Nixie and Alec. Do they have the damage to take Alec down? Asgrath still has the Iron Bark. If he really needs to use it, Anti-Magic Zone gets traded out. A big swap here onto Drainer, but he should be able to easily tank through this damage with Anti-Magic Zone, with the Fortifying Brew. Those defensive cooldowns can carry him forward and keep him alive.
All right, at this point, no real significant lead for either side. Perhaps ABC have some opportunity to kill Cervantes, but before dampening, I don't think so. Instead, going after Nerd Rage with Blind on Drainer. No damage, though, and Drainer is deciding to sit through this. We would typically see a healer use his Gladiator's Medallion to break out of Blind, but Drainer's just read the situation, said, you're not committing any damage. I'm not giving you my Gladiator's Medallion. Now, the Pumpers look to reverse the damage, getting crowd control of their own onto Asgarath, chasing down Alec. Alec downstairs, but all three members connecting here shortly. Drainer with that Way of the Crane might be the X factor. That push right there, I would have maybe liked to have seen some Gladiator Maledict usage on their part. Might not have been available. Double stun secured by Drainer. He might be moving for Paralysis. There's Paralysis. Typical crowd control combo by Drainer. But now Drainer caught out in the open. He's going to have to relay that Transcendence or look to try and escape with that Frozen Orb down. Alec's damage is boosted quite high. Drainer gets Ursul's Vortex back into it. Good placement by Asgarath. Pressure still mounting, but Alec is forced to somewhat retreat away. Fortunately, Drainer actually just jumps down back in line of sight, tries to use the corner to line inside him. I would have liked to maybe have seen Drainer just stay up top. He's setting himself up to use the Transcendence Portal to escape, but I don't think jumping down was a necessity there. Asgarath has managed to sneak away. He's regenerating mana, so instead of trying to stop that Drainer, drink, they go for a kill, and they manage to bank an evasion. So you basically have two choices when the enemy team's healer starts to drink, is either to find him and stop it, or to just push for a kill on another target that is really far away. And in that position, they at least managed to pull evasion from Nixie, so he's got to keep aware of that, because they could switch back to him later on. Asgrath won't have as much room to breathe. Drainer securing another double stun, tons of damage. Nixie in trouble. I really like what the Pumpers are doing strategically here. They're definitely looking like a strong team for the whole tournament.
Yeah, they got Nixie's safeguard trinket as well earlier on, so he doesn't have that to rely on. Now with no vanish, no evasion, no cloak of shadows, no nothing, Nixie is increasingly vulnerable. A stun onto Asgrath. Nixie's still in execute range. They might be able to take him down. Drainer and Cervantes close it out. Intimidating shout going in from Nerd Rage onto Asgrath, and that's all the crowd control that they needed. These consistent swaps onto Nixie will bank them a win.
That's why we call the Pumpers the Pumpers. They're going to be able to do it on the close quarter map. This is one of the things that is really interesting, though, about the fact that Dalaran Sewers does pan out the way that it does. Do you think that it is an anomaly that we went to a small map and we didn't see the Pumpers able to grab the win?
It might be necessary because of the game on Nagrand Arena. It looked way closer than this game, honestly. And Asgrath went for the drink on the small map. We saw the Pumpers immediately swap over to Nixie, pull out that evasion as a result from that opportunity that they had. And then again, in the end, they just managed to land a nice crowd control with that intimidating shout, and Nixie doesn't have that defense anymore. Because of the small map being so punishing, we see Asgrath trinketing that leg sweep in a moment, I believe. Yep, there it is, leg sweep, trinkets it, and then of course we can see Nixie making a nice getaway here with the Iron Bark as well. But due to the map being so small, we know that Nerd Rage and Cervantes, they are going to have a lot of uptime. And here I wanted to see Alec cast out these polymorphs. He's doing a good job with it right here, but he needed to get a few more, but the positioning of the map doesn't allow it. Again, Nerd Rage coming in with that nice fear there, and that's all you really need. You force out the trinket of Asgrath, you force out the evasion of Nixie earlier on, then you can get that intimidating shout and then just ride that momentum and actually take him down. A little bit poor positioning there as well on the end of that one, kind of using that small little pillar at the top of the bridge there, on the ramp, to line of sight Alec, actually basically negating his whole class. Otherwise he could have re-sheeped Cervantes on the Dispel, or potentially even sheeped Nerd Rage there and maybe saved Nixie.
Is this a matchup that just completely revolves around swap opportunities? We talk about how the Rogue isn't going to be the primary target. It's a target that when you see the opening, you're going to have to go onto it. Is this all going to revolve around those swaps?
Well, what it comes down to is you sit on the mage and you get the temporal shield, you get the Iron Bark out of the way, and then you go ahead and combo your Maledicts. You have a lot of uptime because of the map being so small, but whenever Asgrath goes for the drink, the mage is usually in a safe spot where he has his blinks ready, he might have a Nova, and he might have a lot of healing over time effects. That's when you just Nixie time, you swap over to him, you get a Stormbolt, you get a leg sweep, anything like that, and then he doesn't have any healing over time effects. That's going to force out his personal cooldowns like the evasion, and then you manage to do that one more time, or just capitalize on that he doesn't have them, and you win the game.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Sid said to keep your eyes on when we were going into that game as well. Those stuns really going to be one of the things that telegraph, okay, a go is going to happen onto the Rogue as of right now. So when we do get into the next matchup, do you think we kind of see more of the same? Is that going to be what we need to pay attention to? Is that where the potential kills are going to come from, or are we going to kind of dial it back and maybe even see some different comps?
Oh, I feel like we're going to be going to some different comps or seeing some different comps. I think if the Pumpers once again lock in the TSG setup, so the same comp we just saw from them, I think ABC once again, they're going to make a switch to that Elemental Shaman Frost Mage Restoration Druid. I think that's a really good matchup for them, depending on the map. It was a close call. I feel like Alec was close to going down in that last matchup. If the Pumpers decide to switch it up and go for the other comp we've seen them run, which is bring in Fnobbers,
it's not.
I don't think they're going to do it just because I feel like
it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
The reason they don't want to do that is because ABC is going to be able to punish that Balance Druid quite a bit. Keep him in bear form, and I just feel like the Pumpers won't have much of a chance.
The only change that the Pumpers should think about is maybe Resto Druid instead of Mistweaver. But even then, I think they can win with Mistweaver. They just need to be coordinated. If they stop being out of sync and actually go for those big pushes onto the mage, even against the Ellie mage, I think they can still win. Sure, they're disadvantaged, but they were really close to winning on Dalaran, and things just slipped away from cooldown overlaps, a little bit out of position. So I think overall their best composition is the Mistweaver Arms Warrior to blind lock, and then ABC, of course, go Ellie Mage, and the Pumpers just have to play better.
Yeah, so you say no Moonkin here, that you don't expect the Moonkin here because you can easily punish that chicken. How do you do that?
Well, you lock in Rogue Mage. We already saw it play out yesterday, and I can imagine Fnaubers doesn't want to go into that fight. They basically did no damage. Fnaubers was in bear form the entire game and then died.
Yeah, you can just choke out everything that he would be able to do, completely shut him down. So the Pumpers know that on the blind they need to lock in this composition. If we ever do see the balance, Druid, we expect that to be coming in when they have the compositional advantage that ABC has right now.
Yeah, and once again, we're going to see the Frost Mage and the Elemental and Resto Druid. I like that they picked Tiger's Peak here just because the map takeaway is just not significant enough with the additional maps in Battle for Azeroth, and with the fact that people are now comfortable actually picking Blade's Edge, because that's something we didn't really see in Legion. People were kind of, they didn't really want to pick Blade's Edge as it was being reworked prior to that. So now people have gotten a chance to kind of learn how the map works and what comps are good on it. People are more used to actually locking that in. So you have Blade's Edge, you have Hook Point, you have Blackrook Hold as well. So even if you take Dalaran away, even if you take one of the smaller maps away, the Pumpers are still going to have all they need is 2 small maps, and there's plenty of that, so they don't need to do that. I like this map pick a lot more. It's more of a standard map. You don't need a super wide map as well. You already have a really good matchup here. ABC should be able to take this one, and then the Pumpers presumably are going to be locking in a small map after that.
Map pool's definitely evolved, and it's something that we've talked about quite a bit. I feel like the only map that we really don't see is Mugambala. We've seen it before, but for the most part, we don't really see Mugambala. And I feel like before Mugambala even did exist in the map pool, there were maps that you kind of didn't see. Mugambala, though, is that map now. Yeah,
Mugambala definitely not utilized by a lot of teams, but I feel like that is to the detriment of some of these teams. I really feel like they could implement certain strategies, like if they focused on making that map an advantage for them. A lot of teams aren't used to it because there's lots of different areas on the map, and you can implement different strategies to sort of exploit the map. And if teams really focused on trying to learn that, add up strategies and compositions that they can run, potentially that could give them an advantage, but we really haven't seen many teams go for that just yet.
It's such an interesting map. It does seem like because of all the reasons that some teams would avoid it, it seems like that's the reasons why, as a team, you might want to focus on it and actually try to use it, because you could really throw teams off guard. I mean, Sid and I talk about it all the time. It's like having a bunch of different maps thrown together. There are so many different areas that are so well defined. It goes even a step further than just thinking about the room, for example, on Blackrook Hold and how that is going to come into play. So maybe we see some more Mugambala in the future. I don't really think it's going to be this season even. I don't even really think we'll see it too much before we get to LAN. Maybe when we get to LAN, some people try to throw people off of that map, but I feel like it might take some time before players do start to use that, Sid.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a good map for Mistweavers and Warlocks that run the Demonic Circle, but Destruction Warlock being the meta and they're not running Demonic Circle, you can actually benefit a lot from just the Z-axis going up and down. You can also teleport from the starting area all the way back to the top. There's a lot of room to use portal mechanics. It could be a good map for the Pumpers actually moving into Game 5, but the smaller maps are just superior in every regard. That way, if Asgaroth locks in this Ellie Mage on it blind, they can go for the Moonkin Death Knight, deny all drinks, win on that front, pick the small map, and they go for Rogue Mage, then they just go for Death Knight Warrior and run them down. The Pumpers have set themselves up really well here in this series by being able to take the blind pick.
It's usually what we see happen. Like, the blind pick is something that is really important, and that's why when we looked at that last game, we were saying how important that could be to really change things up. When you get to the 4th game, obviously you can go on the reverse sweep, but the thing is you never have true momentum again, right? Your back's against the wall for the entirety of it. You need to win back-to-back, and that means you won't have that pick on the final game, the one that's really going to decide the series if you do make it all the way to Game 5. The Pumpers looking to close it out here on Tiger's Peak on a composition that they've looked very strong on. I mean, that's the nice thing about this matchup, and something that we've seen very often by the time we do actually get to Sunday. Not only are the compositions pretty meta, but it's also everybody on their mains, right? So it's something that we have seen. It's a trend that obviously makes sense, but it is important to put your finger on it because we've seen it time and time again. Tiger's Peak now going to be the map. It's medium, it's got pillars, and it's got 2 small elevated platforms. Can you really, with either of these comps, take advantage of it? Do we expect the Monk for any reason to be actually using portals there?
Well, I think the Monk is going to be playing at those kind of elevated areas to the sides. It's a pretty nice spot for him to dish out healing and still line of sight a lot of the incoming crowd control from Alec. And previously we used to see Elemental Shamans Gust of Wind on this map. It was a really good map for Elemental Shamans, but now it's more a place where you want to kite up. You're going to see Jamie maybe move towards that spot and then try to knock people off. But with Cervantes having that death grip, it's not going to be favoring either team too much in this matchup.
I don't think the map is necessarily going to play an advantage either. Tiger's Peak is just neutral, mid-ground, very similar to Nagrand Arena, and that's probably why ABC went for it. Maybe they're actually afraid of the Moonkin composition on a large map. That's why they don't want to go there. I don't know why they would be. I'm almost more afraid of the Arms Warrior Death Knight as Ellie Mage if I'm them. I mean, it was a bit of a close call on Dalaran Sewers, and Tiger's Peak isn't much larger than that, so potential for the Pumpers. I'm curious if they're going to go for that split damage strategy. It appears to be the case with Nerd Rage chasing down Alec and Cervantes going after Jamie. Jamie and Alec trying to tag team to drag both members into Frozen Orb to at least boost the damage, but they don't want to spend too much time together as an Arms Warrior can cleave multiple targets, especially with that Blade Storm activated. So maybe Jamie and Alec, they focus on colliding together when Frozen Orb is up and then looking to split apart when it isn't, and if they can implement that, they can increase their damage enough to secure a kill.
Yep. Once again, we're going to be seeing Alec just really focusing on that Ice Lance build, dropping down the Blizzard, resetting his Frozen Orb, and that's when his big moments of burst will be available to him. Cervantes now chasing down Asgarath, and what we didn't see in Dalaran Sewers was the Pumpers trying to slow down some of these drinks. That might be an adaptation that we see here in this matchup. Now that Drainer's played a little bit aggressive, we see Alec actually sneaking a poly. Unfortunately, does break. Repolymorph going to be secured. His Nerd Rage going to get bursted down. It looks like he should be okay. Cervantes backing him up very easily with that anti-magic zone. I think that was all three Maledicts from the team of ABC. Oh, there's a third one. Nerd Rage still a little bit low. Drainer having to play catch up at this time, but with Drainer out of crowd control, I feel like those Maledicts could have been timed just a little bit better. Yeah, and that Dark Iron Dwarf racial is definitely showing its weight in gold here in this series, as you can use that Fire Blood to remove the Maledict's healing absorption effect, adding a second removal mechanic so that only one will effectively hit you. And most of the players in this match, I believe, are trying to exploit that advantage. Defensive intimidating shout there to allow Drainer some opportunity to regenerate mana, as both teams are expecting a late game and they want to prepare the best for it. So instead of using crowd control to execute for a kill in the current meta, they instead use crowd control to safely regenerate mana and extend the match deeper into dampening, where it is more likely that they will be able to find a kill. Yep, definitely. That's what we saw in the last game. I mean, what the Pumpers need is they need to get the Iron Bark, they need to get the Temporal Shield, like right now. When you see those two defensive abilities unavailable for ABC, that's when Cervantes, Nerd Rage, and Drainer can sort of team up and try to get aggressive. But at this point in dampening, I still feel like the heal over time effects that Asgarath has available for Alec, they just don't have the damage that they need outside of those Maledict pushes. And we know that they've already used them, I believe, so that's not going to be available to take Alec down just yet, and he should be okay. So both of these healers really just going to be focusing on making sure they're healing efficiently, conserving as much of their precious mana as possible as we move a little bit deeper into dampening. All right, Nerd Rage actually playing double time instead of Stormbolt so that he can get a bit more mobility to stay on target. I think that's a nice choice on his part. This way he will always have a charge for a blink of Alec, and he can stay on target and maximize his damage. Ring of Peace pinning Alec against a pillar so Nerd Rage can have at it and try and dish out some pain, but really not finding any damage. Dampening is definitely required in this specific matchup. Outside of crowd control moments and cooldown activation, the pressure is just seemingly non-existent for both sides. Nerd Rage still just developing. I would like to see maybe they collide on the same target here shortly. Drainer has opted to completely drop his Way of the Crane, so I was saying that that was very important for their team to push forward and force ice blocks, and he's completely decided to abandon that and maybe just look for an out mana fight against Asgarath. So Drainer playing for an even longer match in that regard, and I'm not exactly sold on it. We've seen it work in the past. It's a lot more safe, but I would much rather see the Pumpers coordinate together with those Gladiators Maledicts. I think that that win condition is a lot more likely to occur
then the mana war between a Restoration Druid and a Mistweaver. We do see Alec and Jamie positioned on top of each other during Frozen Orb. I like that positioning. That forced a lot more pressure. They got Icebound Fortitude and Life Cocoon from the side of the Pumpers, but now that that Frozen Orb has faded, they need to split up again and limit the amount of damage coming their way.
Yep, Drainer tops off Cervantes, and like you said, Drainer, without the Way of the Crane, really limiting his offensive capabilities, but picking up the Thunder Focus T, that's going to give him an opportunity once he gets out of crowd control to avoid some of those interrupts from Alec and Jamie, getting those free casted heals off, where he can actually top off Cervantes and Nerd Rage if they really need it. In the last game, we saw him try to keep his teammates alive with the Way of the Crane, was completely out of mana, got kited on it, and just couldn't find the healing. Potentially, he was feeling like if he did have that Thunder Focus T, he could have just healed them up, would have had a little bit more mana, and maybe could have prolonged the game to the point where they could have taken down Alec, as it was so close. If the Pumpers feel like they don't need that extra offense that Drainer provides, I definitely think it was a smart choice to switch it up.
Asgarath tried to sneak away and went for a drink. The Pumpers tried to punish for a Gliders Maledict play on Alec, but they didn't even net themselves an ice block. And it seems like the Pumpers are just waiting for whenever Asgarath tries to sneak away and regenerate mana, and then going for a big push instead. And I mean, that could definitely net them a kill, as it could be a bit of a surprise for the team of ABC. We saw a swap onto Drainer just a second ago, and they had to use Anti-Magic Zone from Cervantes, so another major key defensive cooldown out of the way for the Pumpers, and ABC now with an opening to potentially kill Nerd Rage in the next Lightning Lasso. I still would like to see Jamie use these hexes. So Hex on Cervantes, Lightning Lasso Warrior. It's just, that's the basic setup. I'm very surprised that Jamie didn't go for that play right there, while Nerd Rage did not have his Gladiator's Medallion. Maybe it wasn't available. Instead, going for the Stormkeeper, trying to boost some damage, but not finding it. Now we see Jamie and Alec come together during Frozen Orb. That way it snares up both melee, maximizes the damage of the mage, and then as soon as that Frozen Orb fades, they split up. So the positioning on both teams is definitely top level in terms of strategy, but still at this point, deeper dampening is going to be required.
Yet none of these healers really want to make a move. Drainer opting out of offense. He's just going to be sitting at the pillar trying to keep his team alive for as long as possible. Asgarath doesn't want to push in either. Hasn't really been looking for any Cyclones. I'm not even sure that he has it. I'm not sure if he's spec'd into it. Maybe he's feeling like it's too much of a threat. If Nerd Rage gets a Spell Reflect on that, or Cervantes manages to steal that with Dark Simulacrum, maybe it's just too much of a threat for their team to really deal with, so he just wants to play a little bit more passive in this matchup. Iron Bark going to be used there on Alec. That's one of the things that the Pumpers need to get through. If they can get through the Temporal Shield as well, that's a potential push for them. Cervantes and Nerd Rage looking to move forward. That's going to be one Gladiator's Maledict. Alex manages to survive with his Temporal Shield. He should be fine here in this situation, dropping out the Frozen Orb and Blizzard, trying to get some sort of counter pressure here against the Pumpers at 16% dampening. Jamie moves forward, lands the full Hex onto Drainer. Nerd Rage could be in some trouble, but I think the Pumpers are going to be able to stabilize quite easily. Thunder Focus T used by Drainer. This is what I'm talking about. When he gets out of those hexes, out of those polymorphs, having that free cast ability with that Aura Mastery effect, the Thunder Focus T, he can easily top off his team.
Yeah, it will be very easy for him with those cooldowns when they are available. I'm not the biggest fan of the strategy that Drainer is going for, opting out of that Way of the Crane. I think it's almost a necessity when facing this composition to have that extra bit of damage to at least force ice blocks and push the team over the edge. Drainer's going for a much safer play. Of course, when we move into Game 5, his team has the advantage anyway. They can then lock in the Balance Druid if they see this Frostmage Elemental Shaman composition coming their way, or they can block in the Arms Warrior Death Knight if Rogue Mage is sent at them. So either way, the Pumpers have set themselves up well by winning that blind pick and winning their map advantages. So even if they lose here, it's not the end of the world. Maybe going for the safer strategy to try and catch ABC off guard deeper in dampening might be the case. It's the only thing that I can really think of here. Drainer just wants to play a little bit slower, but the other thing he loses out on is that when he's counterspelled, he has basically no healing going out. He would otherwise be able to use Way of the Crane when counterspelled. Now he doesn't have that, and there's two ranged interrupts, as we saw a counterspell into a Wind Shear. Couple bits more into dampening, and Cervantes could disappear during a play like that from ABC. Alec trying to do his best to escape to safety. Still stable. Asgarath is going for a drink right now, so this is where I want to see the Pumpers push forward and get some momentum, hit the same target. Right now they're not. Cervantes is going after Jamie, and Nerd Rage is still going after Alec, and Asgarath can just so easily regenerate his mana back to full as a result.
Yep, definitely. Cervantes going to be very vulnerable here in midfield. that Death Strike's not going to be nearly as effective at this point in the game, and it's just going to be increasingly worse, and that's going to really tax Drainer a little bit later on, where Cervantes can't just charge in on whoever he wants, be out of position. Right now, he can definitely afford to do that, but a little bit later on, it's going to be scary. Asgarath completely full on mana, 100% mana in this situation. So I really don't know if this Outlast strategy from the Pumpers is going to be paying off. Asgarath, he's been able to easily heal through this damage. An intimidating shout comes in from Nerd Rage, but they're just going to be sticking with the split strategy. I don't know if they're going to be able to generate enough pressure with the split strategy. I think the damage that Alec and Jamie have available are going to start to overwhelm Drainer. He's going to have to channel out a lot more. Enveloping Mist, if he actually wants to keep his team alive. Nice little setup here onto Alec with the leg sweep. He gets gripped in, but with that Thunderstorm from Jamie, Alec's going to be completely fine, and that go is completely stopped.
I mean, when we get into deep dampening land, things get a little bit chaotic, so there is potential for the Pumpers to just find a kill out of thin air, even though they are falling quite far behind. In something like this, they managed to pull Astral Shift from Jamie by just simply switching targets. They've been spending a lot of time on Alec, and now switching back to Alec. I do like this from the Pumpers. They're getting a lot more aggressive. They're pinning AWC against the wall, but now as they overextend, Drainer has exposed himself to crowd control, and they immediately capitalize on that. Now Cervantes forced to make a bigger trade with that anti-magic zone. Life Cocoon is not that big at 37% dampening. They have to use anti-magic shield on top of it, so 3 major defensive cooldowns off the back of Drainer making 1 aggressive push, and that's why I was thinking he dropped the Way of the Crane to avoid that situation. So why did he walk into it there without even running Way of the Crane to boost his damage? Now his team is really far behind on cooldowns, and they're going to have to work with very little to try and find a kill. They catch Alec in a leg sweep. They go for the Sharpened Blade. This would be a good time for some Maledict trinkets potentially. They want to wait. That Temporal Shield and Iron Bark are going to fade. While they're activated, they switch targets. Instead of attacking into the bonus defense, go after a different target that would be more vulnerable. I think that's definitely a wise decision, but Drainer still playing aggressive and forward without Way of the Crane. He isn't getting boosted damage. He's just exposed to crowd control, now getting counterspelled. His team trying to do the best that they can to just close this series out and advance to the grand finals. Even if they can't, they've set themselves up well for Game 5 with the map pick and the comp advantage. Asgraf dropping a Maledict here, but denied by Drainer's Life Cocoon. Cervantes starts to stabilize, trying to retreat away from Jamie's Stormkeeper, which could be devastating here at 43% dampening. Drainer still locked down in crowd control. I think Nerd Rage is likely to be the target for the rest of the match. Cervantes is just too stable on that Death Knight class. Nerd Rage Frost Nova up. Instead, actually, they are going after Cervantes. That Lightning Lasso, Frozen Orb perfectly comboed together, but that Primal Elemental was next to Cervantes, so he needs a target in melee range to use Death Strike. That giant Fire Elemental right next to him is perfectly adequate to access Death Strike, and definitely able to capitalize on it. Well done for Cervantes, not getting caught off guard, finding that opportunity, restabilizing himself. Now they're pushing forward. Once again, Temporal Shield, Iron Bark out of the way, and even still with that, dampening is high. That defense doesn't appear to be enough, and the Pumpers are starting to push forward to desperately try and get an ice block from Alec.
Yeah, Alec low. This could be an ice block, the first one of the game. He is forced into it. There's the Cyclone. Cervantes doing an excellent job with that Dark Simulacrum, setting up his team. Asgrath has his trinket, no Iron Bark, not really too much healing. If Cervantes and Nerd Rage can stay on target, Alec could definitely go down. Drainer into a bash. They're looking for crowd control. But we saw this happen on Dalaran Sewers as well. Nerd Rage and Cervantes, they need to be careful not to overstay their welcome, but I do think it's important that they make an offensive push right here, right now. Drainer getting hexed up, Cervantes into the stun. He has the anti-magic zone. Is he going to be able to get it off? Gets lower and lower, and that added damage from Asgaroth just overwhelms the Pumpers. They tie up this series 2-2.
We're going all the way to a Game 5, and the question is of strategy. We heard Ven in the cast say quite a bit. Does it seem like we see the Pumpers going for the right line of play? And Zico, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Do you think that they did take the right plays there?
Well, I think that maybe they should just play the Way of the Crane. I think they kind of underestimated how effective it is. And the split game strategy, it seems to me like the Pumpers want to go deep into dampening and then maybe try to get a one-shot through everything on Jamie or take down Alec through pretty much everything because dampening is so high. And I just don't like it. I like when they play the Way of the Crane, they try to play aggressive onto Alec early on and force out some of these ice blocks, because at this point, when it's 49% dampening, you pop all your damage, you get an ice block in return. Alex still has another one, and at this point in the game, you invest so much damage. Alex gets topped off, of course, in the ice block, and then hits his turn to be the aggressor. Beautiful hex from Jamie. Nice lightning lasso. The Ray of Frost as well there, the doubled stream basically, and they just take him down there. So it's hard to survive that combo and then get another offensive push, force another ice block, and then get a third offensive push after that and win. So at that point in the game, I want to see them either go for Jamie, or at that point in the game, I want to see them have already forced out these ice blocks by being aggressive earlier on, instead of splitting, just combining their Maledicts on Alec.
Yeah, that double stream dream going to create a lot of pressure and a win condition, and we see now a Game 5. What's going to change? We're going to find out right after this. The Pumpers is a squad that you didn't really hear us talk about before this tournament, but when you look at their road right now, they are so close to being able to take the whole thing. Method Black sits there in the lower bracket. Who they get sent down by? The Pumpers. The Pumpers now, though, are starting to lose their grip on this series. AWC trying to take it with just one more game.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what map we're going to see here, but I would like to see the Rogue Elemental Shaman kind of come out from AWC here in this one.
I definitely agree with that. caught off guard there with some productions. But ultimately, in this next series, what do we expect to see? What do we think the comps are going to be?
Well, I think it's going to once again come down to the pumpers with their blind pick at the end. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, actually, so the ABC is going to be they're going to be switching it up. They didn't like that matchup, the Rogue Mage Resto Druid against the composition that the pumpers was bringing. That Death Knight Warrior seemed to be a little bit too much for them, so they're going to be switching it up, bringing in Fnobbers in this matchup as a response to ABC just going with that Wizard setup, I think, on the smaller map. Not exactly sure what ABC was looking to set up here, but I don't know. I think ABC at all costs was trying to avoid this matchup, but now they're sort of forced into it. They weren't winning with the Rogue Mage Druid, so trying to get a win where they can here, but I definitely think they're disadvantaged.
And Sid, this was the big thing that you said. When we look at the Balanced Druid, we know that it's scared of that Rogue Mage. They don't have to worry about it now. They set it up. They use that momentum that they did have from the beginning of this series into Game 5.
Well, the pumpers have high-level map awareness, really. Picking Blade's Edge, realizing that Drainer could be a weakness on Mistweaver. He was then able to use the map effectively. Now locking in Hook Point, whereas you would think, oh, we're setting up for a Boomkin. Maybe they want a big map, but no, you actually want to set up so you can stop the Druid from drinking, because they know that Asgrath is likely to be playing only Druid, or if he plays Priest, he's going to run out of mana 3 times as fast. So when you know that's the limited options there on ABC, you pick the map where you can stop the Druid from drinking. Then no matter what composition they pick, you've got that in your back pocket, and the pumpers definitely had this planned out from the beginning.
And this is one of the reasons that, you know, you look at Fnobbers and you go, why the heck did he jump ship? Why did he leave the team that he was on? It was such a great team. They looked like they had a lot of promise for the entirety of the year, but you can see the flexibility that the pumpers are going to have with these multiple compositions. And now when they do get to this game number 5, they're looking to live up to their name. Nerd Rage going to be sitting down on the bench for this one. He's already gotten what he has needed to done. Game number 5, though, will ABC be able to regain? Will they be able to take it when it looks like everything is stacked up against them? If they don't, they have to go play against Method Black, a team that the pumpers were already able to pump down.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is match point in the upper bracket. Let's see if Fnobbers substituting in here for Nerd Rage can carry the team. This composition was definitely their answer for Wizard Cleaves, but they have not gone up against ABC in this matchup in particular. So let's see if Jamie can bring some surprise. Jamie positioned quite forward and aggressive for his team. Alec chilling in the back line, not making a move just yet, as Alec is likely the target, so he wants to be able to retreat away as he is right now to avoid any sort of boost damage Fnobbers has currently active with that Incarnation. This is typically a big window of time that the pumpers want to get cooldowns out of the way. They've managed to at least get the Temporal Shield and Iron Bark from ABC, but that's more than a fair trade on their part. Then they switch targets to Jamie. Good pressure output from the team of the pumpers, but they didn't net any major cooldowns like an ice block, so I don't think they're going to be able to really take advantage of that push.
I think what the most important thing the pumpers need to do is they need to be slowing down any drinks from Asgarath, and I think on this map it's very easy for Fnobbers with the Starfall to shut that down. So Asgarath's going to have to be very efficient with his mana in this matchup. Nice little swap here onto Drainer as he gets bursted down a little low, but potentially a little bit of a miscommunication there. It looked like Jamie was trying to take down Drainer. Meantime, Alec was putting out pressure onto Fnobbers, and I don't think that's ideal. I think if they had synced up their damage on just one target there, they could have netted a lot more defensive cooldowns.
Yeah, Fnobbers going to be the main target here, especially before dampening, because he does not have access to Death Strike, no consistent self-healing either, so he will be the most vulnerable target for the team of the pumpers, and he's being caught out of bear form quite frequently. He can't really afford to be that lazy into dampening, although before maybe he can get away with it and then maximize his damage. Cyclone at low health here onto the mage Alec, but he did not activate any defense, so that Cyclone is just annoying and not that valuable. Asgrath immediately restabilizing, but here's the advantage that the pumpers wanted with this map Hook Point, is that they will have a mana lead over the Druid. Drainer getting swapped too, able to Transcendence back behind the wall, but Alec is ready and waiting there for him to try and dish out some damage. However, unlikely before dampening that they'll find a kill. Way of the Crane gets activated, Drainer jumps into the fight, but gets polymorphed. Good punish by Alec.
Yep, definitely. The main strategy for the pumpers in this matchup is just to put out as much consistent pressure as possible. we saw it work before. I think this is the exact same matchup we saw when they took down Wildcard Gaming. So eventually they just secure the mana lead, and it's really difficult for the Resto Druid to heal through the amount of spread pressure that an Unholy Death Knight and a Balanced Druid has. When we see Balanced Druids, normally they struggle against teams that have a Rogue and a Mage. So the Assassination Rogue is easily able to shut down the Balanced Druid, forcing him into Bear. But the thing is, against these Wizard setups, they're basically able to rain down havoc on the enemy team, consistently put out pressure. They're not really forced into Bear very much in this situation. They can continuously build up damage. Now Jamie getting bursted down to 50% health, but he managed to hold on to all his defensives. Now, I really feel like what this match is going to come down to is the mana bar of Azgarath, and that is the main objective of the Pumpers, to just make sure they can eventually get that to 0.
I've been wondering what Azerite traits the top Balanced Druids have been running since all of the recent Azerite trait rearrangement and interesting choices on the part of Fnobbers. Definitely want to make sure that you get your hands on a Bonded Souls Azerite trait, as it gives you haste and it gives you significant healing to your team, but he's also combining Power of the Moon, which is basically just increasing the damage of his Moonfire, along with Battlefield Precision, or if you're Horde, Battlefield Focus, which just adds a bit of extra damage. And it's really useful if you're playing a class that has damage over time effects, so something like Moonfire and Sunfire, as it removes stacks quite quickly and can add a lot of damage to you overall. And I think it's a smart build that he's running when playing with a Death Knight, where their main goal is consistent damage, deny drinks in the early game, then later on overwhelm them with consistent sustained damage. Definitely a cool build on his part for sure.
Yeah, the Pumpers, they have a really good strategy in these different compositions. In this tournament so far, I've been impressed. The Warrior Death Knight has been able to deal with a lot of the teams, and then anything the Warrior Death Knight struggles with, in particular these these Mage Shaman setups. This composition with Fnobbers seems to be a great answer. So far, seems like things are in favor of the Pumpers in this matchup. Alec looking to try to build up some damage, but he has been struggling. Drainer has very effective healing. His single target healing and his AoE healing is really strong. I'm curious to see what talents he's actually running. If he has a counteract magic, it's going to be particularly strong against Jamie on that Shaman with Flame Shock. It will empower his Renewing Mist, giving him significant healing throughout the match. Nice setup here onto Fnobbers with no Trinket, now no Barkskin or Renewal. That's an opportunity for ABC, but Alec had to use the Icy Veins in order to generate this pressure. But still, Fnobbers will be increasingly vulnerable as the game moves forward. We are now at 1% dampening. Azgarath, he got down pretty low mana early on in the match, but he's been able to maintain so far, still hovering at around 50%. I think the main scary cooldown for the Pumpers that they have is going to be Fnobbers with that Incarnation, which has about a minute left on it. Once that ticks down to 0, he'll have that available, and that's going to be their opportunity to push and get really aggressive. I want to see it paired with Drainer with the Way of the Crane. They could potentially force out massive defensive cooldowns from ABC or net themselves a kill.
I like the build that Cervantes is running as well for his Azerite traits, bringing in the Magus of the Dead. Every time he apocalypses, he summons in a little skeletal wizard, and obviously as a melee class fighting 2 ranged ones that are kiting you, summoning in an extra minion that can do damage while you are unable to is a smart decision on his part. Of course, running the Hell Chains, that orange beam that we've seen basically every Death Knight playing with. Definitely a mandatory Azerite trait to bring in one of those just for some extra added damage. Plus, when he has his pet on a different target, maybe he can get some cleave onto 2 targets with it. Definitely the strategy for the Pumpers is to focus on sustain damage and overwhelm the team deeper into dampening. And so far, they have been executing quite effectively on it with already a well-established mana lead. Dampening now at 10%. Then you add in the fact that Drainer has Way of the Crane, increasing his damage quite heavily. They could go for a really big punch, having access to that, on top of the sustained pressure that Cervantes and Fnobbers have built for.
Full Sheep now on a Drainer. Fnobbers a little bit vulnerable, forced into Bear form, trying to tank through a little bit of this damage, including the Frozen Orb. Now Incarnation gets used. This is the opportunity for the Pumpers. Drainer's on full diminishing returns for Polymorph. So that is the opportunity for the Pumpers to get a little bit aggressive. Lightning Lasso will shut down some of the damage Fnobbers has available. And miraculously, Azgarath's mana has actually been going up as we move forward into dampening. I really didn't expect that. Normally you'd see the Pumpers have a massive mana lead. They still do have a little bit of a lead, but he has been doing a great job maintaining his mana so far in the game. Has the Innervate, immediately using that to stabilize his team through that Incarnation. And now the ABC is going to be completely healthy for a little bit longer. Another full Polymorph secured by Alec. Nicely done onto Drainer, but Jamie and Alec, they've just been struggling to find the pressure that they need to start getting defensive cooldowns from the pumpers.
Now, if you're a healer in the current meta that is all about mana, you definitely want to check out the Azerite trait, Ephemeral Recovery, where when you go below 20% mana, you will gain 8,843. This is what Drainer is running, and it's very important because later in the game, that can almost give him an extra Way of the Crane when he combines it with Mana T. So he's definitely trying to maximize that usage. And now as a Mistweaver Monk in the current patch, another Azerite trait you should definitely look to pick up is that of Burst of Life. It reduces the cooldown of Life Cocoon by 20 seconds. You then combine that with the Honor Talent Chrysalis that received recent buffs, and you've got a formula for a 55-second cooldown Life Cocoon. You can rotate that quite effectively with cooldowns like Bark Skin on Fnobbers, Anti-Magic Shield on Cervantes, and you can rotate between those two, bouncing back and forth, similar to a Restoration Druid's Iron Bark, so you can have perfect defense to keep yourself alive deep into dampening, and that is what the pumpers are utilizing here in game number 5. Because of their win on the blind pick, this is their strategy for victory in game 5, playing it very straightforward and just focusing on consistency. I really don't see any openings right now for ABC. They're in a complete chokehold from the pumpers, and unless Asgrath can sneak away and find a drink and regenerate mana, it's just an inevitability at this point.
Yep, full Hex secured on Drainer. Fnobbers in a bash, good cross crowd control, but once that bash fades from Fnobbers, he is able to decurse Drainer from that Hex, freeing him up to get some heals out in this matchup. Drainer's been able to maintain his mana quite well in this matchup so far. Alec now looking for a little bit of burst. This is his Icy Veins, but they weren't really able to get too much. Cervantes all over him, once again looking for the consistent pressure. Asgrath's mana still continually going up. I'm wondering if he's actually sneaking away for drinks. I haven't noticed it so far, but the amount of mana he's been able to maintain, once again, sitting down in stealth, looking for a complete reset on his mana at this point. Well done by ABC. There's definitely potential for them to turn around this matchup. We know Death Knights with their Death Strike are going to be a vulnerable target later on in the game when it's not nearly as effective, and Jamie and Alec could definitely look to be capitalizing on that.
Yeah, most certainly they can. Asgrath has managed to reset at least into the fight, keeping his team alive here. You definitely want to avoid the lower bracket. You want to avoid Method Black, the Shark, lurking in the murky waters down below here in game 5, as the loser of this will go head-to-head with them up next, then have an opportunity to get to the grand finals and claim a first place spot. ABC and the Pumpers both need some top-level finishes to accrue enough points to have any hopes of qualifying to the spring final, so there is a lot on the line to avoid Method Black as long as possible in this game. Dampening ramping up now at 31%, and it will end the match because it reduces your healing, and eventually healing will do nothing. I'm curious to see if we do end up breaking records in this match. These compositions definitely have the capability of doing that. Big push by the Pumpers towards Alec, but Jamie now reverses the pressure with that Lightning Lasso, gunning down Cervantes. That double beam combination once again bursting Cervantes. They can't afford to lose, but they may just lose here and now. Drainer barely saving Cervantes in those final seconds. Close call. ABC showing signs of life. Perfect thunderstorm, perfect crowd control. ABC have to kill Cervantes in this next couple of seconds. Do they have enough crowd control to take him out? A full Cyclone secured. Cervantes on the run. It's match point. Jamie tries to close it out. Cervantes denies it for a second, ducking around the corners. Drainer still locked down in crowd control. Cervantes is just terrified at this point. They had the entire game in the bag. They had the entire series in the bag. They don't want it to slip away.
I cannot believe he managed to stay alive. ABC is in complete disbelief, running around the pillar, avoiding the damage, interrupting the follow-up crowd controls. Cervantes pulls off a miracle. Now a swap over onto Asgrath, and I'm wondering how